Here I am testing my microphone volume. I'm going to be doing a lot of goofy voices today. Oh.
Check, check, check. Here's what we got. We got a bunch of things that we're going to be talking about. And I'm going to be going into some different accents.
So what if I get, really shy, though, and, I don't want to do any voices?
Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Alien Familiar RPG Podcast. I am Clayton.
I'm Kyle Perkins, and this is the only time you'll hear me do a normal voice this whole episode. I can't promise that. That's a big promise there. It's me, KP.
Before we get started, you can find show notes and more at alienfamiliar.com. You can email us at alienfamiliarmedia@gmail.com. We are on Facebook at facebook.com/alienfamiliar. And if you would like to help us out with supporting the show, you can do so at patreon.com/alienfamiliarmedia. So if you enjoy our content and would like to help us out with hosting costs, any help you would be able to give us would be greatly appreciated. And thank you very much for joining us today. As Kyle has already alluded to, we are going to be talking about doing voices today. In particular, we're going to be trying to talk about how to portray a character with and without doing a special voice for the character, doing accents or going really wild and doing some of the monster voices that I particularly love to get into. Kyle, I know you absolutely love to do accents, probably as much as I do. I've been doing voices for longer than I've been doing tabletop role-playing games. Whenever I was a little kid, I would do specific voices for the different action figures I was playing with. And my mom remembers me doing this as when I was as young as 5 years old.
That's incredible.
My mom has clear memories of me being 4 years old with my He-Man action figures, trying to sound like He-Man and trying to sound like Skeletor.
And I try. Oh my God, did he try? Dude, that's great. I don't have that kind of that's something you've always told me you do, is practice accents. Just you're driving down the road and you're just doing weird voices in your car, and I love that. I don't have a lot of childhood experience doing that, but I would portray characters because I was very alone. It was just me and my toys. And I did have friends, but they lived, 15 minutes away. It's not like I could just walk down the street. I had to get my parents to drive me. So I would put on my little child suit and go be James Bond. I would put on a military uniform and go be a soldier. Probably explains a lot about me, but we're not going to crack into that right now. This is not my therapist. Also, I did weird home movies with a VHS camcorder when I was a kid. Did you ever do anything like that?
I never did that. I never really had a camcorder. Well, no, that's a lie. My family did have a camcorder whenever I was starting from about the age of 7, but I was never into the videos and stuff like that. I was just really into cartoons, and I was really into action figures. I had He-Man action figures, I had Ninja Turtle action figures, I had G.I. Joe. I was really big into G.I. Joe. So with all of those types of cartoons had a very broad accents that they would have with a very large cast of characters. And so I feel like that's probably where my very young love of doing different voices came out, was me practicing and doing the voices of the different characters that I was playing with whenever they're in character they were talking to each other. I actually was told many years later as an adult that one time I was over at my aunt's house and she was babysitting me, and she had concerns about me because I was doing all of these weird voices in the basement.
Oh my God, that's incredible, dude. Satanic panic shit. Or perhaps just thought you were a strange and special boy. I Cartoons are a great vein to mine for voices. I mean, there's just an incredible variety of sounds that people can make, and when it's an animated medium like that, I mean, dude, the sky's the limit. When you're doing a voice in person with your friends, it's a lot different than being in a sound booth, or as I am right now, being in a rented bedroom looking at a desk that I don't own as a mic that I do own sits on the desk and talking to you from 1,200 miles away. We've touched on this a little bit before, but having the courage to do those voices in your basement while your aunt listens, or in this case around a gaming table, it's not easy.
It takes a lot of just lack of care. Like, just, you have to just not be afraid of looking embarrassing.
Yeah.
Because you really are just looking a fool whenever you're doing it.
Oh, absolutely.
I do it because that's fun to me. I have always been the type of person who I like. In my real life, I'm really, really quiet, except for whenever I gain the center of attention. Like, it's weird. I'm usually the quiet one, but everybody knows that at some point I will take center stage and I will either do or say something that commands everybody's attention.
I think that also fits with a lot of not just the characters you play, but the way you play them. When Clayton Ray does a big voice, whatever that voice might be, it doesn't have to be what I just did there. It is because your character is about to do something that everyone wants to be watching, and if you gotta go for it. I think that there, here we go. We're cracking into it. That's my first piece of advice for the episode. You gotta go for it. If you kind of half-ass it, either because you're scared, which is understandable, like it's okay to be scared, but like whatever the reason might be, the biggest sin is if you're kind of like uncaring about the voice you're doing. You're just like, well, everyone else is doing one, I guess I should try something. But anyway, if you half-ass it, it's not going to come through. It's going to be even worse than you're afraid it will be, because you're not putting your entire self into it.
I would disagree about half-assing it. I think even half-assing it is worth doing.
Really? I mean,
if you're really timid about it, you need to do whatever you can to get started at it. You aren't going to get better at it. You're not going to get more comfortable at it until you put your toe in the water. I feel like personally, I jump in, but I have seen a lot of people who are just way too timid, and asking them to jump in head first is just not realistic. But I've also seen people who are very shy at the table and in life start really small, a very small change in their accent. Like, I'm from southeastern Ohio. We have some hick accents here. This voice you are hearing right now, this is actually a put-on accent. This is not my native accent. I strove very hard in my teenage years to eliminate my native accent, and it's to the point now that I cannot call upon it whenever I want to, but it does come out whenever I'm talking on the phone with my dad. For some reason, that my accent comes out then, but not any other time, and I can't do it on command.
Huh. I wonder if I've ever heard that in the time I've known you. I'm not going to walk back my don't half-ass it comment. I think there are good approaches to both of those things, but I think what I meant was, like, here I am walking it back. You have to commit to trying something. If you don't commit, you're either going to do nothing at all, no accent, no voice, and that's not why you're here listening to this episode. Or if you don't commit, you're what I'm specifically referring to is, and I've heard this happen, someone wants to do a voice and they kind of start out and then it just kind of fades away. They don't stick with it, even if it's a small, simple little voice changed than their natural tone. if you're going to do something, commit to it, stick with it. Don't let other people's lack of accents stop you from committing to the accent you've chosen. And don't let your own self-consciousness do that either. But you are right. Something as small and simple as keeping your natural voice, but, and I've said this before, I know I have, but speeding up or slowing down your own natural voice for that character. That is, in my mind, one of the very first, most basic, air quotes, accents you can do for a character. What do you think of that?
Yeah, any small little tick, verbal tick that you can add also is really good for just testing the waters of doing something different. And you don't really have to do something that is really big and different in order to very effectively convey that you are in a different character. Something that I have done for some characters who have accents that are very similar to the accent that I'm speaking in right now is I will add like some like really long pauses or some strange cadences. I learned this from listening to William Shatner talk about his method for gaining people's attention whenever he was acting. Because if you take a strange pause at a weird time, suddenly the person who is listening to you, they're leaning into it. They're wanting to hear what you're going to say next.
Oh, I've never heard him explain why he chooses to do something such as that. And that's true. That's cool. That's interesting. Think about, again, I'm going to go back to cartoons because I think it's a great example, for a place to go and find accent ideas. You think about a character that speaks really, really quickly. Like right now, listener, I urge you, dear listener, to think about a character who speaks quickly, fast. Do it now in 3, 2, 1. You're thinking. Haha, I made you think. That person's probably, small, kind of anxious, mousy. Maybe they're very, very intelligent and don't know when to turn off the floodgates, so they just talk and talk and talk and talk. And you can do that with your own voice. You can do that right now. I'm not changing my voice here at all. I'm just speaking more quickly. I'm saying the same things over and over again because I'm actually talking faster than my brain can think of new words. Does that, there you go. That's a little, look at that. Masterclass with Kyle Perkins. Normally people pay me $500 for that, but it does come with lunch.
It is incredibly hard to speak faster than your normal speaking voice because I get into that exact same thing you were running into. Your mouth is going faster than your mind is used to, and your mind is just trying to keep up in order to be able to come up with the next thing that you're going to say because you are just completely blanking out on the next thing that you're going to say because you are not at all used to speaking just this fast.
Man, conversely, speaking slowly, to me, it's like pulling teeth. I hate it. I can't do it, Clayton. I can't do it for very long.
See, for me, speaking very slowly, it's just like a wave that washes over me. I am much more articulate whenever I'm able to slow down my voice and use the concepts that are coming into my mind, and I have the extra time to flesh them out and to weave them together into the verisimilitude of the character that I am trying to portray so that I can come off as much more grandiose and potentially much more erudite and eloquent with the words with which I choose to speak.
Now see, there you go. You're playing around with your vocabulary too. You kind of went Fraser Crane on me there. That is, I think, another really basic way to characterize your character. Purposefully use simpler words. Use words like erudite. It's I guess it's kind of like easy mode. But while we're on the subject, if you're listening to this and you really don't know much about doing voices or you're afraid to, play with pitch. Change the pitch to be higher or lower. Change your sort of like things like fricatives and other weird like speech therapist terms that I don't know. For example, enunciate more. Do things that will make my pop filter be very upset with me. I mean, I'm not changing my tone of voice there. It's just changing the way I pronounce certain words. What are some other really basic, steps we can get out of the way? Or not steps, but tactics we can get out of the way, Clayton?
Well, not necessarily something that you're doing with your voice, but something like I learned early on, and I watched a lot of impressionist comedians when I was a kid. Like, I loved watching Kevin Pollak, Dana Carvey, Jim Carrey, those types of people doing impressions of other people. And something I noticed, and it has borne out, is every single time they do an impression, they do something physical with it. They change the shape of their face. They do something with their hand that's different. They do something physical, and it is something that they are doing that whenever they were practicing, I know for a fact that they were practicing this particular facial expression or this particular like hand movement or whatever it was that they're doing. They make it linked so that whenever they do this thing, this other voice comes out. It is using your body to change your voice.
Yeah, that's great advice. Thinking of Jim Carrey makes me think of that man's eyebrows. My God. And then it makes me think of whenever I do voices, I don't employ the like do something physical tactic, and that's a good one. I should start doing that. But I just kind of did some here off mic just now when you were talking, and I'm like, holy shit, because I don't listen to you, Clayton. I don't care about what you say. I'm only here to say what I want to say. And
you only wait to talk, right?
That is correct. So my eyebrows, like when you're doing, think of like a very think of like a very innocent character that doesn't really know much, and like right now my eyebrows are they're angling upwards towards the center of my forehead, both of them, and I kind of look like I don't know what's happening all the time when I do this voice, and that's helpful. That's like I don't know, maybe practice in front of a mirror or something. That might be a good way to kind of keep track of things that you can either do on purpose, or like I just realized, things that you accidentally do when you find a voice that you like, and then that can be a kind of a way to call that back.
Yeah, turning some sort of muscle memory into what you do in order to get into the voice. I try to have something that I do to link a voice, because I am never going to remember how I did a particular voice if I don't have some physical way of connecting to it. Something that I can do to prep my mind for getting ready to do the voice. I have lost so many voices over the years because I don't have I've either forgotten the physical thing that I do or the physical mannerisms I do whenever I'm doing the voice, or something I've done sometimes is I have a particular prop, like, and it doesn't have to be anything fancy. It could just be as simple as having like a pin that I hold in my hand a particular way. And like Disney villains, they're generally characterized as being kind of gay coded. And so whenever I try to do a voice like that, I would try to do similar things with my hands, like James Woods' character of Hades. Whenever Hades is drawn in Hercules, he's definitely doing something with his hands. And whenever I try to mimic that sort of an accent, I will similarly do something with my hands in order to try to pull out of my mind the physical structures I do with my throat whenever I try to do a different voice.
You saying you do something with a pen just made me think of Boris from GoldenEye. You're just clicking it and spinning it around and claiming you are invincible. Interesting about the Disney villain thing. I was sitting there thinking about a lot of old-timey villains. Some Disney and then others. And yeah, like absolutely that was something they would use to vilify people. But then you think about the type of villain that would be codified that way. And, you know, they're very eloquent. They tend to be someone you would absolutely want to have some nice salmon and Chianti with. Someone that would be able to speak with you about all sorts of topics, various things, plans, schemes. They're clear. They know what they want. They're going to go for it. They can express themselves well. And that makes a good and interesting and powerful person. Unfortunate that, yeah, they kind of got codified as villains for quite a bit. Anyway, now I'm rambling. How many times have you heard somebody say at the start of a session, "Oh man, I can't get my accent back," and they'll go through a whole bunch of various things, and then it usually ends up turning into kind of like some kind of maybe like some kind of Bayou accent or something, and then it's just like, Jesus, dude, you were Australian. What are you doing?
See, whenever I start to do that, I go very broad British accent. That's what I default to every single time. It doesn't matter what the accent originally was. I will either go broad English accent or I will go broad Eastern European accent. Those are the two areas I go to if I can't remember what my particular accent was going to be.
Yeah, I tend to lean pretty heavy Irish. How many times have you heard me do an Irish character? Having a phrase, if you can reliably say a phrase in your character's accent, and I have heard some comedians do this and like podcasters, like whenever they put on a particular accent, they'll always like start out with a certain phrase to get themselves in that mindset because they've practiced that phrase the most and it reliably puts them there. I think that's a pretty good strategy.
Do you have a particular Irish phrase you say whenever you want to get into that accent, Kyle? I ask knowing that you do. Or a particular word that you say repeatedly until you get it right?
Wait, I do?
40?
Oh, farty. Farty. Yes, farty. Oh, how could I forget? I legitimately forgot. Farty. Yes, farty. Oh man, it's cracking me up.
That is one of my salient memories from our retreat podcast, where that's what you did in order to get into your Irish character's accent. Was you just kept saying 40 in your accent until you got it right.
That was early in my Irish accent anthologies. I think I may have reached a point now where I can just summon that one. But no, that's a good one. I'm not going to go into any other phrases, but you know, if you think of something you can say reliably in your accent, hold on to that. Don't let it go.
Very closely related to that. One of the ways that I come up with the accents that I'm going to try to do is if it's a cartoon character or whether it is a character from a movie or TV show, I will pick a particular phrase that the actor has done and said, and I will repeat that phrase until it sounds right. And I will use that phrase in the future in order to get into the character, into the voice that I'm trying to put on at the time. And of course, right now I'm blanking on any of them that I've ever tried to use.
Yeah, I know. Let's, unless you think of something, in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, let's go back to like nitty-gritty things you can do with your voice and speaking patterns. Wanted to talk about and I'm actually a hack. I've been lying this whole time. I don't know what I'm talking about, but I do know from an actor's standpoint that doing certain voices kind of out of your nostril, you know, like here right now I'm directing like this is very nasally. I'm directing more airflow kind of through my nostril, if that makes any sense. And I'm definitely speaking not out of my diaphragm, where I fully puff up my chest and speak very bigly, if you will. That was a pretty bad example there at the end, because that one's hard for me to do. People like I like to sing karaoke, and I'm always being told, like, dude, you like sing from your diaphragm, you fat fuck. People at karaoke, not very nice, turns out. But you know, those are fun, like, voice changes to practice. And also, what I did there when I poorly did the, like, big voice diaphragm example, although this is getting better now, I forced myself to have proper posture just now. I'm no longer hunched over like some kind of gremlin.
I really like to play with pitch, going as deep or as high as I possibly can. And like there's like singing is something that like voice warm-ups is something that a lot of people that I've seen online do to get themselves set up for that. And you just start off as low as you can go, and you go do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ta, ti. And I always crack when I get to the upper range of it. But whenever I finally decide I want to go as high as I possibly can, I cannot help but kind of go into a little bit of a singing cadence whenever I try to do it.
It's so funny to think about these voices, and I cannot help myself but imagining the kind of person that would possess that voice. They're like intrinsically linked. You know, and a lot of, I do think a lot of this comes from cartoons in my mind. You know, you think of the little flitting fairy character that has the really high-pitched little voice, and then, you know, the big hulking goon that has the big deep voice. It's cool shit. I don't know. Oh shit, I forgot what I was gonna say. Too many personalities lurking around in my skull right now. Cut that out. People don't need to know that I forget. I'm ruining the podcast. We're gonna lose all of our listeners.
So, Kyle, do you ever just play around with your voice and just try to see what types of sounds can come out of it? Because that's something that I do whenever I know I'm alone. Like you said, I don't remember if we'd started recording yet, but when I've said on the podcast and I've said privately that I do my practicing in my car. And there are times when I'm going to work or coming home from work where I'm just trying to make weird sounds come out of my mouth.
Man, I do that sometimes, and for me, it ends up happening when I sing in my car, like, all the time, and I will try to mimic the voice of the singer, and that can lead to some very fun, fun and silly sounds coming out of my mouth. Like, you got Tom DeLonge from Blink-182. I mean, you got a little bit of this guy going on. I mean, like, there's all kinds of weird, goofy shit. But purely strange voices. No, I should do more of that. It sounds very cathartic.
I spend so much time in my car whenever I'm alone, I spend an embarrassingly frequent amount of time just making weird sounds. It's something that I do in private in order to work up the courage to be able to do it even amongst my close friends, because there is a huge jump between having the confidence to do that whenever you're by yourself and in front of another live person. There is a physical barrier that is there, and until you have broken through that barrier, it just makes you want to just completely shut down. I often forget exactly what it is that I need to do in order to make that change in my voice or to make that sound. I often forget, and that's why doing the physical things is something that I do to help overcome that hurdle.
I don't have any solid advice on overcoming that hurdle, because, I mean, I've been role-playing not as long as you, but for a long time, and I've been doing silly voices for a long time, I still feel it. I do think that practice, we're talking about whether you're making goofy sounds or practicing your Irish accent or practicing your Tom DeLonge, Tom DeLonge, I don't know, voice. You got to practice it, and the more confident you get, and the more you use those little signifiers to help you remember that voice, the more confident you're going to be.
So, what are some things that you do to discover a new voice, or to discover a new accent that you are wanting to do or try to get better at? What do you do to research that and to practice that?
I like to look up clips and examples and try to emulate them. We talked about doing that already. I guess I do practice a character's voice by myself when I know I have a game coming up or something that I need to create a voice for. And man, there's just nothing harder when it comes to doing a voice than trying to do an accurate nationality accent. I keep circling back around to this idea. And there's a wealth of videos on YouTube and various places where you can find people kind of speaking in those voices and telling you certain sounds that type of accent will make a certain way. As far as discovering new voices, TV. I think a lot of characters on TV, if I find a character I like, I will just try to speak like them. And I mean, we're really getting in the soup now. Sometimes I can't help it. I will, if I'm consuming season after season of a TV show or episode after episode of a podcast, I find myself naturally wanting to use the humor of those characters and speak a little bit like some of those characters, almost like I try to pick out their thought patterns and personality traits and apply them to that character voice. Does that make sense? Am I rambling?
You are rambling, but that's exactly what I do. I usually it's from movies, but also it's from video games. Like video games, especially the main characters, they will often have a very distinct voice, and you will hear a particular phrase that they say over and over and over again, and it gets stuck in your head. And one of the ways I deal with that stuff getting stuck in my head is I will repeat it, and I'll try to make my voice sound like it.
That's why I can do a pretty good Warcraft orc voice.
Oh my god. Dude, I do get little things like that stuck in my head, and I just have to say them out loud. And you doing your Warcraft orc voice, I've heard you do that voice a lot in games, but just now, for some reason, it made me think back to all of the different StarCraft voices. Did you play much StarCraft?
I did, yeah.
Dude, battlecruiser operational. Like, there's just so much good shit there.
Light it up.
Let's burn.
Diablo was a game I played a hell of a lot of whenever I was a kid, and so now I know. Stay a while and listen.
I read you, sir. man, just there's a StarCraft clip for every possible occasion. I know that some of our listeners have to do this stuff too, and I hope that if you don't do voices in your games, but you do realize, oh shit, I do say weird little inside jokes in the voice of another character to my partner, to my friends, whatever. Tap into that. That is the root of this stupid shit that Clayton and I are talking about. If you watch a particular YouTuber and you have an inside joke with your buddies where you say a phrase of theirs, that's the beginning of doing a character voice. Just use it. Just straight up copy that voice, for your first time, or maybe for your 50th time. Hell, I still copy voices. Fucking Jimmy Hawk was just David Hayter, I think that's the actor's name's Solid Snake from the Metal Gear series.
So I want to talk specifically about doing, you mentioned a little bit ago about doing specific nationality accents. That's one of the reasons why I love playing fantasy games and sci-fi games, is because it doesn't matter how, quote, bad your accent is. If you are trying to do an accent and it comes out terrible, but the accent you're doing, like before the era of recorded sound, we literally have no idea what accents actually sounded like. There are linguists who are trying to figure out what Shakespearean accents sounded like, but we don't fucking know. And it doesn't matter how bad your accent is. Once you do your accent, that is now canon for what your character sounds like, and that's not a bad accent. That is a 100% accurate representation of what your character's native accent sounds like. And it works for historical and it works for sci-fi. And I specifically love this idea of using it in history and sci-fi ever since the movie Elysium. I don't know if you remember from the movie Elysium, but Jodie Foster was in that movie, and her character had the wildest accent. It was terrible until you realize she was doing a, quote, futuristic accent that was just a hodgepodge of different accents. And yes, it sounds terrible. Kevin Costner's, quote, accent in Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves sounds terrible, but you can't prove that isn't what Robin Hood would have actually sounded like.
Man, yeah, that ought to give people confidence. Like whatever you do for your accent, I guess that's what I mean by don't half-ass it. Stick with it. Stand by your man. Make it happen. Make that accent yours. Be unabashed about it. I thought of another thing when you're like, how do you come up with new accents? I have been trying to get away from more like stereotypical realistic accents. I like them. They're fun. They're useful, especially if you're doing a bunch of NPCs in a fantasy game. Just give them different nationalities of a different nationality's accent. But trying to come up with something truly unique. I don't know that Jodie Foster character. I have seen Elysium, but it's been a long time. But it is difficult, and yet it is also really rewarding and really fun. I guess cannibalizing bits and pieces from different nationalities and coupling that with all of the different things we've said before. Just trying to make your voice be something totally unique. It's not easy, but I would recommend, and I think this could be a whole topic within this episode in and of itself. I would recommend thinking about why that person might talk that way and what characterizations you want to elicit by speaking that way, by combining a slight stutter with an Australian backcountry accent with someone that also speaks in a high-pitched voice. I'm gonna try to do that. Can I try to do that?
Go for it.
All right, here we go. Australia. Yes, right. Now, this might actually go a bit more New Zealand, but right. So I'm Australian here, but I've kind of done what I set out to do, even if it's turning into something a little bit more weird, and now I'm getting slightly embarrassed and no one's actually in the room with me. I don't know, there it is. I did it live on camera. I've never done that voice before.
You made me remember one of the phrases that I say whenever I'm trying to get into a particular accent. And this is a very particular voice that I've done, that I have a very particular phrase that I say. From The Road Warrior, the gyrocopter pilot. He says this phrase, and whenever I wanted to get into a similar accent, a similar, like, both deep, gravelly sound and that accent, Like it's the scene where he has Max, but Max has tricked him and gotten his gun trained on, or I'm sorry, the gyrocopter has Max's gun, pulls the trigger, and it's just a blank, or not a blank, but it's a dud shell. And then Max loads an actual shell into it once he gets the upper hand, and he says, "Oh, that's dishonest, low."
That's a good one.
So now, anytime I want to try to sound like that, I can just say, "Oh, that's dishonest, low," and I get into that particular voice.
Man, I think back to for that style of voice. I think back to, I guess a little less dastardly, but I think back to Chippendale Rescue Rangers. Oh geez, dude, I don't even know his name anymore. Like Monty or something. The big mustachioed mouse, and he would always,
Monterey Jack.
Holy shit, Monterey, there it is. And he would always go, "Oh, too right."
Yes, having those little quick phrases that you can say to get into a voice, it's a jump start for your brain to get into the mechanisms of actually doing the voice.
A catalyst. I think, yeah. A Rube Goldberg machine down the road to insanity. Yeah, we'll go with that too. There's a character that I do in a game I'm playing currently, and he is basically just Jean-Luc Picard, but in the Firefly universe, and I've kind of combined some elements for that one into something that's really kind of subtle. It's not like a big bombastic accent, but I think that it portrays the character well. And I find myself thinking a lot about why this character would speak certain ways. And so this ties back in with backstory. This character was from like a more noble class of citizen. This character was from a very educated family. This character has seen quite a bit of people he cares about have, terrible things happen to them. And all of those different elements manifest in this voice. Let's see if I can, and it's a very subtle one. Oh God, oh no. Here we go again. It's a session, and I've lost the. Yes, indeed, I'm Captain Gavin Doss. This is how I speak. I am slightly nasally. I tend to clip my words and enunciate. I don't speak terribly slowly, but I kind of inadvertently pause, like we've already talked about. And when the character finds himself in a situation that causes emotion, the emotion does not necessarily come through in his voice, but he becomes quite a bit more forceful with what he's saying. I'm pushing more air out. I am being rather aggressive here. And so all those different things kind of manifest in different facets of the voice. And so once you have this like toolkit that we've been talking about, I do love creating a voice that is not terribly silly or monstrous or bombastic, but really personifies the character well. It's a lot of fun.
And once you've done it a few times, even the other players at the table immediately notice when you do something, even something as subtle as that, and they know you are in character and they know everything that you're saying is in character. And I think that goes a long way for getting the rest of the group to participate in the role play whenever you are doing that. Because that's something that I've run into time and time again, is there's a couple of players, or maybe the entire rest of the group, is just not comfortable doing role-playing doing the role-playing of role-playing games. They only ever talk in the third person, or they describe everything their character is doing. They never say I. They never describe from their own perspective. They always try to distance themselves and doing those little things to let other players know you are in character. If they then interact with you, I have noticed more often than not, they will then slip into using I expressions rather than my character expressions. And that's progress for getting people to role play, to be in character. It's very small progress, but you are easing them into getting more comfortable taking on these other roles and actually being the character that they are portraying at the table. And I think that's probably the biggest barrier to getting an entire group of people sitting around the table to participate in role playing like what we're describing, is just breaking through that apprehension that people feel, because it's not there is this stigma against getting into character. I don't know if this is where it came from, but I definitely know that it has its roots in what we were all taught about the Satanic Panic. I had a person in college who I told them that I play role-playing games, and he was a pretty fundamentalist Christian guy, and it was beyond his he immediately thought that was just too weird that you would want to talk in character. And I had to explain it to him. Well, you don't think it's weird when an actor is playing a character and they say things in character using I words, do you?
The amount of times that I've joined a pickup group of gamers to sit around the table, people I don't know, and watching everyone flop around in their own brains about whether or not to do an accent, and the amount of times that it usually settles on no one does an accent. Yeah, it's apprehension, and it's difficult to break. I do like your strategy of discussing it that way, and I think that it's also safe to, or rather, well, safe works, but it's also helpful to just kind of say, hey, so, I'm going to go ahead and say this in character. Yeah, so are we going to find that map or not? And then it's okay to kind of be just completely upfront, and instead of just jumping into an accent, you can basically signal all right, guys, my fellow gamers, I'm going to do an accent. And 9 times out of 9.5, it's well received. I think that apprehension is kind of manufactured. No one's going to be like, dude, what the fuck was that accent you just did? That was terrible. That's not going to happen. And obviously, saying get over it is not a good way to deal with legitimate social anxiety. But if it's at all helpful, people like accents. People like to characterize what they're doing. And I think I'd be surprised if people didn't join in with you.
Everyone can do an accent. You just have to be brave enough to try around the table. And I say everybody can do an accent because I can't think of anybody who I haven't heard at least attempt a very particular accent. And I didn't think about this until just a few weeks ago whenever I was listening to an episode of Behind the Bastards, and they were talking. And first, I don't remember the exact situation that came up, but the host and the other guy who was there, they were both from Texas, and they started doing a dumb person. I'm using air quotes, dumb person. And they commented, why is it that all the, whenever we do a stereotypical dumb person, they have a Southern accent? And it's true. Every time I've ever heard somebody try to do just a dumb hick accent, anytime they try to do an accent of somebody who is dumb, it's always a dumb hick accent. And I have heard pretty much everybody in my life do that at some point. So everybody can do an accent. Even if it's bad, it's still worth doing, and it's still going to be fun around the table to portray the character this way, because that's why we're getting around the table, to have fun. And if you can bring an additional layer of fun by doing something that's kind of stupid, role-playing games are kind of stupid. So go ahead and go for it.
Yeah, literally go for it. Find a character from a cartoon, from a TV show, from a movie, from a podcast that you like, and steal that voice, and then do it. And there, you've just taken your very first step into making your characters that much more memorable. All of the memorable characters that I can think of had some kind of accent or inflection change or manner of speaking. All of the characters, and that is, I'm thinking of other people, by the way. For once in my life, Clayton, I'm not being selfish, narcissistic. All of my favorite characters that I've ever played have also had accents, though, as well. The characters I used to play that were just basically me, but as a fucking eldritch knight, named Pyle Kirkins, rolling around, talking like I talk. I don't remember those guys at all.
Yeah, here. I never remember. The characters I remember are the ones who the player got into it and they tried to be someone other than themselves.
Ultimately, that's what this is all about, isn't it? Just being someone other than yourself for a while. And that applies to your decisions in combat, that applies to the way you use your skills, and that applies to the way you talk.
Do you have any other points you really want to get into, or do you want to go on to geek things?
No, I wanted to cover super basic stuff that people maybe haven't thought about before, and we definitely did that. I wanted to try to talk about placing personality behind the voice you choose. Do you feel like we hit that coherently enough?
To be honest, I don't know. I won't know till I listen. I won't know till I go back through and listen to the episode and edit it.
I know we at least touched on it. You and I actually feel like we did a very reasonable amount of accents. I feel like we kind of held back, but hey, that's okay.
I did my orc voice. That's a win in my book.
Well, then, sure, dude. Let's call it. If we think of anything else, maybe we could think of a way to turn that into another episode on, kind of on the topics of being a better role player, which is a nice realm to be in. I like those topics.
All right, then let's go ahead and move on to geek things. Do you have anything you want to promote?
Yeah, I've got one. I have been playing a lot of an indie game on Steam. It's pretty inexpensive. It's under $20. I think it might even be $10. It's called World of Horror, and it is inspired by Japanese horror manga artist Junji Ito, along with a lot of other eldritch, Lovecraftian, things you shall not know style horror themes. The art and the way the game is played as well, it's all styled after old school PC, kind of like a third of the screen is taken up by this sort of clunky but charming, clunky by design interface. There's a very limited color palette, but there are lots of color combos to pick from. And anyway, the gameplay, it is set in the town of Shiokawa in 1980X, and elder gods are rising to destroy humanity, and they happen to be focusing in on your town. And so it's a procedurally generated game. You get 5 adventures adventures, 5 horrific tales of terror to solve. And there's interplay between them sometimes. There's items you can get. So if you happen to get 5 random ones and you've played before and you're like, oh sweet, I have this case and that case, and I know that I can get the tiny key in this one and use it in that one. You also die a lot, and that's part of the experience. You very well could die within 10 minutes, but if you get lucky, or if you know exactly what to do, I'd say you could do a complete playthrough in about an hour and a half or less. It's awesome. It's difficult and definitely takes some getting used to. But I put a lot of hours into it. I've got a lot of enjoyment out of it, and the game is still in early access, so there's more content coming. Definitely check it out.
Sounds very cool. My geek thing is a upcoming release of a role-playing game, a tabletop role-playing game. It's called Everyday Heroics. It is I'm not quite sure. I don't have a lot of the details, but I think it's going to be basically D20 Modern, which was released about 20 years ago by Wizards of the Coast. It is basically an update of D20 Modern into current gaming philosophies and basically using the 5th edition architecture for updating D20 Modern. Since D20 Modern used the 3rd edition D&D rules, Everyday Heroics will be using 5th edition D&D rules, and Jeff Grubb, who was one of the original designers of D20 Modern, is also working on this game as well. It's coming out. There's going to be a Kickstarter sometime in the spring. I don't know exactly when it's going to be, but there's going to be a Kickstarter for this new version of D20 Modern that is called Everyday Heroics. I'm probably going to be backing it because I was a huge fan of D20 Modern back when it came out. I really liked it. So, yeah, that's going to be my geek thing. Although I've only got at this point, I've only got a link to the Evil Genius Productions, which is the company who is releasing it. I don't have any more details at this point, but this is most likely going to be the next role-playing game that I'm going to kickstart when the Kickstarter launches this spring.
Cool. Yeah, I'd like to check that out too.
All right, Kyle, what do you say we stop this bullshit and start rolling some dice?
Clayton, I'm trying to roll these dice, but my ass cheeks are dummy thick and they keep bumping the table. Oh, that was not a 1. Now it's a natural 20. Do you accept my dice roll? I really did bump the table with my butt there. That was my physical thing that I do to get into that void. Anyway, let's roll some dice.
All right.
This has been a production of Alien Familiar Media. You can find past episodes and more at alienfamiliar.com. You can email us at alienfamiliarmedia@gmail.com. This production is protected under a Creative Commons non-commercial attribution, no derivatives license. Music for this episode is Suburban Outlaw by Forget the Whale and can be found at freemusicarchive.org.